Hello, and my name's Darren Charlwood. Okay, I'm a cultural educator. Okay, it's what I'm getting in the ear a bit. I'm a cultural educator. I work for the Royal Botanic Gardens. Okay, down in the harbour there, as well as out at Mount Annan Botanic Gardens, up Mount Tumar. I work for the National Parks and Wildlife as an educator as well. I'm an artist. Okay, it's just basically part of a broader sphere of what I do as a cultural practitioner, you could say. Okay. Now, before I get too far into things, I'd like to acknowledge the country we're standing on. All right, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people. I personally know a lady who has kinship to this country where we're standing on Tumbalong here. Her family basically grew up in boat sheds in Tumbalong here where we stand. Okay, so I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people. I'd like to acknowledge their elders and their ancestors. Okay, both past and present. All right, and the points that I'll bring up about respecting cultural knowledge, it's a view from my point of view of the way that I do it. I think I could talk to you about what you should do and what you shouldn't do and all the rest of it, but I don't think you really get you won't really get my point. So I'm going to just basically talk about what I do and how I respect cultural knowledge. Okay. So from the very start, I'd like to say that working in Sydney and teaching culture is something that requires respect. Okay, the way that I've respected the approach to this is, firstly, I talk to my elders about it. Okay, I want to make sure that my elders are happy with me sharing my cultural knowledge. Okay, that's respect. Okay, and secondly, it's approaching people whose country I'm standing on. Okay, so Gadigal people still live amongst us in Sydney. We're in Sydney. It's the highest populations of Aboriginal people in Australia. Okay, so you can imagine the Gadigal people feel very swamped by all these other Indigenous people. Okay, and they lose their voice. Now, if you could bring my points up right now. I'll just basically go through these. Okay, so acknowledgement of country and acknowledgement of knowledge is a big deal. Okay, people don't quite understand the intimacy of country and what it means, and how language, country, and culture is all sort of connected into one big sort of thing. You can't understand one without understanding the other. Okay, and it's very important that when you're on the individual countries that tourism works on, that you acknowledge the country you're standing on. Okay, and acknowledgement means getting in contact with community. Okay, it might take a little bit of time sometimes to actually find the correct people to talk to and learn the correct ways to approach this, but it is essential that you do this, and that's respecting and acknowledging that respect of knowledge of these people. Okay, now it's about permission. Right now, like I was saying at the very start, I've asked permission of my elders that I can pass on tradition, and talk about my culture, or Wiradjuri culture. All right, but it's about permission talking about a special area. Okay, I'll go back to Sydney once again. On this land that we're standing on, it's covered by mostly buildings and everything now, but there would have been features in this landscape that would have explained the actual identity of the people, how they come about, why they practice the rituals and the culture that they do. Okay, so it's very important to get that permission. All right, now. The next one, old traditions, stories, they're very precious, all right? I don't tell other people's stories, okay? I work in the tourism industry, but ultimately I'm an educator. I educate children, I educate adults, okay? And telling other people's stories is not something that's a done thing, okay? I'll give you an example. Tiddalik the Frog, okay? It's a children's story. Right, you can buy books of it, animated, you know what I mean? It's like this long children's tale. But ultimately, that's a very precious story that belongs to a group of Wiradjuri people, okay, that come from sort of like south of Wiradjuri country. All right, if you were to buy that book in a bookstore, all right, it's printed in America, animated like, the story's told by an American lady in America, designed by, people from overseas. You know what I mean? It's so incredibly disrespectful that it's hard to believe that things like that happen, right? Now, I've got 3 stories, okay? And they're my stories, and that's all I tell, okay? I don't mind other people sharing my stories if I tell them, you know what I mean? I don't feel as though I have to give them some kind of written permission to tell my stories. I need them to understand that they're Wiradjuri stories and that, you know, they were told by me, okay? But if I tell people my 3 stories, then, you know, I've just shared that oral knowledge with them. Because after all, Aboriginal sort of culture is an oral tradition, okay? So when you get other people telling other people's stories, and it becomes this mismatch of you know, sort of a you know, like a collage of different countries, you could say, that one person's spruiking as tales. Traditionally, when you tell these stories, they're part of your identity, okay, and they're part of your cultural tradition and oral tradition. So that's something I wanted to touch on as well. Letting people talk about their own culture, you know, that's the most important thing. And you guys working across Australia in the tourism industry, get the local people involved, okay? It is of the utmost importance to get the local people involved, okay? Let the people whose culture it is tell and share their culture, okay? That's, you know, that's another big part of acknowledging, you know, the land that we're standing on, okay? Now, just as I talk about this, I'll touch on why things like this are so important, okay? Now, I was always taught that in the beginning, when the spirits and the ancestors created country, okay, they created the country and they created all the animals and everything in it, okay? Now, when people walked that country and they looked at the features of the country and the animals in it, all right, they read and seen these things, and through reading that country and walking that country, the ancestors gave them language, okay? And through that language, they gave them tradition, all right? It goes back into the way I was saying that language, tradition, culture, and country are all one piece, okay? You can't separate them, okay? You can't separate different bits and pieces and carry them around, or have people carry them around like a toolkit of Aboriginal culture that they want to share, okay? It's not respectful, right? Another one, you know, I'm Indigenous. You know, I'm an undercover brother, all right? Lots of people see me and instantly think that I'm you know, I'm a white Australian, okay? And in ways that I am. But I have a cultural link and heritage, okay, that I'm very proud of, all right? And yeah, but I can't speak for all Indigenous people, okay? When you come across someone who, you know, is prepared to work in your tourism, you know, sort of environment where you'd like to, you know, put across and be respectful to Indigenous people, I feel as though you have to be wary about the people that you get to do this, okay? You really should try and get people from that community, okay? And if you get the right people from that community, they will follow the protocols, okay, that I was talking to my elders, making sure that I'm allowed to speak about this stuff, you know what I mean? You know, if in Sydney, as you know, there are so many Indigenous people in Sydney, sometimes it's hard to get Gadigal people work at the Royal Botanic Gardens, okay, but we have had over time, all right? I engage with the community. I know elders that I can speak to and say, is this all right that I do this? You know what I mean? And unfortunately, if they told me it wasn't all right, then I have to respect that, and it's not all right, okay? Now, kinship to country is not transferable, okay, like I was talking about. Having people from far and wide of Australia come to a specific place and say, well, I was speaking to someone and I have a certificate that I know some organisations do. I've got a certificate here that says that I can welcome you to this country, okay? Now, culturally, that doesn't happen. Unless I have an actual blood tie to this land, right? And traditionally, that's how it is. I have a blood connection to the country that I'm from, okay? And it's a kinship, it's a relationship that I have. I can't welcome you to somewhere, okay? I can acknowledge this country, but I can't welcome you, okay? Because it's not my country to welcome you to, all right? Now, the last one, heritage versus cultural heritage, okay? I think that's an important one for me. There's lots of jobs out there that are Indigenous identified jobs, okay? And that's good. It's good to empower Indigenous people. But I feel as though there's a big difference between having an Indigenous heritage, okay, and having a cultural heritage. I'm lucky enough that some of the things that took place in our past, and sort of still do today, didn't fracture and break enough of my culture on my country, which is around Wellington, okay, for me to still have ties and links through oral traditions, okay, through storytelling, okay, that's been handed down to me through time, how to engage with the country, how to feed yourself from the country, okay, how to survive, right? Like I was saying, I'm an educator, and lots of these things are something I take very seriously, and because I do have that cultural heritage and that link back to an ancient culture, I'm happy enough to have the ability and the nods by the elders to be able to share that with children, okay? It's very important to me, all right? So I'll finish there on my points, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have, okay? Do we have any questions?
I think your point around, and I think, so Phil Lockyer from Tourism Australia, I think in relation to, you know, the tourism industry, your point around letting people talk about their own culture, I think is really relevant.
Yeah.
And, you know, as an industry, tourism operators being able to partner and work with Indigenous communities, local people, who can then talk to their own culture. How do you think a tourism business, whether they be small or large, can do that better, or can do that in a way that's really meaningful and authentic?
I think that the first thing that they need to do going into that sort of stuff is realising that it's a must. Like, ultimately, it is a must. You have to get the local people involved in teaching their own culture, okay? If you know, sometimes it can take time, you know, but there's always, you know, in most country towns around Australia, in most big, larger hubs, you'll find Aboriginal medical services, you'll find Aboriginal legal services, okay? You'll be able to link in with some kind of land council that can point you in the right directions, okay? And if you take the time and you do it properly and you get pointed in these right directions, you'll come across people like me who are gagging to share their culture, okay? Who are bursting at the brim with being able to share their culture. Because you have to remember, it's only a couple of generations ago.
1 minute.
It's only a couple of generations ago, or a generation ago, that culture was hidden away, okay, and it couldn't be spoken about. So I think that if you take the time and you do the basic research, you'll find these people, and you'll find people who are more than willing to share their culture. Okay. So hopefully I've answered your question. All right. Anyone else? Any more questions? Come on, I love questions. Come on, I educate kids and stuff. Come on. Hit me with the questions. I'm up for it. Anyone?
On your cultural education,
Yeah.
what are the ages of the children that you're educating, and is the course that the knowledge that you're sharing with these young children, is it part of the national curriculum?
Yes.
Please move to your next appointment, appointment 9.
The two organisations that I do most of my educating with, the Royal Botanic Gardens and National Parks and Wildlife, we both work with the curriculum, okay, to, I suppose in a way, to encourage schools and places like that to come in to get this kind of education, okay. If you don't have the curriculum links, then, you know, they're not, they can't really, you know, sadly, they can't justify coming in and doing this stuff. Okay, so they are all curriculum linked. All age groups, from little kids right up to you know, uni students, basically, that come in that you know, that we have something to offer them, right?
So potentially there's an opportunity for an Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander business to perhaps develop an additional arm to their business by getting into education, tourism,
Yeah.
and sharing culture, so long as it's aligned to the national curriculum.
Yes, yeah, most definitely. There's ways to do that. The gentleman who does the rap plan for the guns, our rap plan at the guns. I work with him in a sideline business called Deadly Ed, and we reach out to from businesses that want to get their rap plan up and running to teach their workers to have a better understanding of Indigenous culture in this country, to working with small communities where I'll work with little kids on community and talk to them about culture. Okay, but once again, these things are done through protocols that, we had a lovely protocol. If any of you guys weren't here for that one, I'd encourage you to come back for the protocol talk. Okay, but, we engage with local communities. We make sure that this is all right. Oral tradition, okay, that's part of Aboriginal culture. It's sometimes it's hard to get your head around living in this Western world, but it's about, talking to people face to face. Not so much over emails and things like that, but sitting down, having a cuppa with someone, and spending time to do it. All right? Yeah. Do we have any more questions? Yes.
Please commence appointment 9.
Hey, thank you. That was terrific. It opened my mind a whole lot of ways of doing business. One of the things I see is the best way to do it is to tell the stories.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there are people busting to do it, because often as an operator we do find challenges of finding people that can tell the stories.
Yeah.
And the other one I was going to ask, have you got a story you could tell us? Have you got a minute to hear a story?
Okay.
One of your stories?
Well, I'll tell you a story. Okay, it's a Wiradjuri story. It was told to me. I've heard it a couple of times. I can't really remember when it was first told to me, but it's about the Willy Wagtail. Okay, this is once again a story I've seen on NITV as well. I've seen it animated, which sort of is a little bit of a an exciting thing. But it's about a Willy Wagtail. Okay, Willy Wagtails in different parts of Australia. Okay. Bring different news, okay? But to Wiradjuri people, Willy Wagtails are a distraction, okay? And you shouldn't watch them. Right now, the story goes that when the old people would have their sort of meetings and their rituals and their dance times where everyone would come together and everyone would do the traditional dance, okay? Everyone would follow suit and do their part and do what they had to do, but there was always this one guy, okay, who would dance different to everyone else, all right? And he'd make a point of dancing different to everyone else, right? And over time, the elders started to get, the older people started to go, this is not on, okay? The way that this guy is just being disrespectful to our traditions, okay, and disrespectful to us. We're telling him not to do it, and he just seems to do it every time, all right? We need to do something about this, okay? And so the next occasion come up, it was ceremony time, all the people come together to dance. Everyone got up to do their part, practice the ritual of the dance and the respect to the ancestors and the creators, the spirits. All right, this guy did it again, started doing his stupid dance, right, jumping around and doing things that weren't part of what he should be doing. And the elders said, this is it, it's time to get him, okay? And they circled around him as he was doing his silly dance, all right? And they just went, this is it, we've had enough of you. And he sort of realised that the time was, nigh. And sort of, as always in a lot of Indigenous stories, he went to sort of jump over the fire to get out of there, all right? And everyone just threw a spear straight into him, and they all hit him right in his bum, right, where he was like dancing. The story goes that as the spears hit him, and he landed into the fire, okay, and sort of like just puffed up and became a Willy Wagtail, all right? And that's why you don't watch Willy Wagtails, all right? When you're trying to focus on something and you can see him dancing around and doing silly things, they always distract you, okay? And you don't watch them, okay? Keep your mind on what you're doing. Focus on what you're doing and what you know you're supposed to be doing. Don't pay attention to these, these silly things that can distract you, right? So that's one of my stories. Okay, so, and I'm happy, if anyone would like to tell that story, just remember it's a Wiradjuri story, okay, and it's part of my oral tradition, I could, quite confidently say that the story that I just told you, okay, is a story that has been told for tens of thousands of years, okay, and the very act of me standing here and sharing this story with you gives me the ability to practice a culture, right, that has been going on in this country for tens of thousands of years. Okay, so thank you for participating in it. All right, so yeah, do we have any more questions?
Hi, I'm interested, thank you, very interesting. I'm interested in your role at Botanic Gardens.
Yes.
And you said that was an education piece, but also you have a tour.
Yes.
And I'm interested in on what is that, how popular it is, has it grown, and what is your tourism offer at the gardens?
Okay, the tourism, basically at the gardens, the tourism that we offer at the gardens, I think there are 3 different tours that you can take. You can take what we call the cultural heritage tour, okay, which is basically you have a tour guide like myself walk around with you in the gardens. Hey, I'm used to working mic free anyway, right? Which is basically a tour. You meet at the information centre at the gardens. You'll have an educator like myself walk you around, talk to you about the history of the gardens, but not just the history of the gardens, but the history of the local people of the gardens. Okay, so that's it sort of ends with a damper, okay, and a bit of a toolkit, an artefact display. It's part of the tour, and where it does end is in a part of the garden we call the Gadigal Garden, all right, which is basically a garden that is planted out with an assemblage of plants that were that are native, endemic to the area and used by the local people, and also some of the plants in there you find on the most of the east coast of Australia and over the mountains onto my country. So they'll talk about plant uses, some of the traditions that took place around the gardens. Okay, and it's a basic. Not basic, it's a nice explanation of the identity of Sydney. Okay, that's basically what it is. There is other tours you can take in the gardens that the shared knowledge tour, which is part of, you have dinner and a meal will be cooked to you using native ingredients. It's done by Drew Roberts, another great educator, very respectful man as well, and very respected man, who'll talk to you about aspects of culture. Right, so I think that there is a twilight tour also that is starting. Comes with this COVID thing. It comes on and off, but that's just basically a nice afternoon sort of tour. It's very romantic. Sydney Harbour, twilight, walking around. That finishes with some cordial made out of lemon myrtle. All right, and once again, it's similar to the cultural heritage tour, but it takes place in the afternoon. When you get that twilight time in the gardens too, there's lots of wildlife in the gardens, you know what I mean? And you get a chance to see a lot of animals that we live with in our urban environment, but it's a bit of a safer space for them in the gardens, so you get more of a chance to see them. Okay, so yeah.
And the Sydney Botanic Gardens tour is one of Tourism Australia's Discover Aboriginal Experiences program.
Yeah, it's in that
90
book.
minutes. It's a really great experience if people want to engage with that.
Yeah, definitely.
From for young people and for older people as well. Did anyone else have any questions for Darren? Anyone else game enough?
Hi Darren, I work at Optus Stadium. We have a 100% owned Aboriginal cultural tour on site.
Yeah, nice.
He does a great job.
Yeah.
And I just wanted your thoughts on how businesses like us can help support those tour operators or Indigenous people running those businesses.
I think that ultimately, when I think about it, I think invest in them. You know what I mean? Encourage them. It's about it's a good question. Because your question can be applied to the greater Australia. You know what I mean? We need to embrace Indigenous culture. We need to be proud of it. Right? I get teachers come in and they say, oh, now we're here at the Botanic Gardens and we're about to learn about Aboriginal history, and it's like, it's our history, it's Australia's history, it's all of our history. Part of the problem is separating it like that. Okay, we need to embrace it, right? It might not be the best answer for your question, but I think that is a big part of it. You know what I mean? Learn who the local people were. Learn whose country is standing on, right? Learn language words. Speak language on country. It's another one of those traditions that you do that, you're partaking in a tradition that goes back for tens of thousands of years. It's a special thing. Any more questions?
Thank you, Darren.
No,
that
no,
was really amazing. I think we can go on, please.
No, hey, thank you very much. You see, this is a great opportunity to come here and talk, but also, I do this for my ancestors. Okay, so having a chance to speak at once again a different spectrum of people is it's wonderful and it needs to be done. Okay, so thank you. All right.